but because there is a lot of confusion in the space of impact investing, and in the space of social finance, I really would like to ask you, what is a social finance for you? What you believe is impact investing? Or what it is for your organization?
So I just want, by a show of hands, who in this room is comfortable with the definition of impact investing? Just put up your hand. Terrible. But no surprise, because I think, Elena, what has been happening in the last 10 years is people use the term impact investing, social finance, ESG, sustainability investing, all at the same time and interchangeably. But unfortunately, there's actually a very, very big difference between these terms. And Alberto, I'll be very keen to hear what your definition is of impact investing. So how I define impact investing, I define it using 3 criteria. And I'd really like to ask the social entrepreneurs in this room to be very attentive when you hear this definition. Because there's lots of impact investors out there who call themselves impact investors, but they are not. They are wolves in sheep's clothing, as we like to say in the industry. So impact investing, in my mind, Elena, falls under 3 main categories. The first thing is that there's got to be a clear stated intention. A clear stated intention. I've heard, since I moved back to Africa about a year ago after having had a career in London, I've heard investors say, every time I deploy capital to Africa or to an emerging market, I'm doing impact investing. That's rubbish, okay? It's pure rubbish, and I tell them it is rubbish. Keep your capital where it is. The intention has got to be very clear, and that intention has got to be defined by saying, I want to generate social return, and I want to generate financial return. If you only have a social return objective, then that's philanthropy, as the professor told us today. Philanthropy is not impact investing. Second criteria, holding periods. That's what I call it. Holding period or patient capital. I think one of our entrepreneurs today talked about the fact, I think it was LOD, who said, when you pick your investor, make sure that he doesn't expect an exit in 4 years. Excellent. And I'm so glad you said that as a social entrepreneur. I have seen investors who've made investments in companies, and within 3 to 4 years, or even 5 years, they come back and say, we've got to sell. Or what is your exit plan? And if you don't have an exit plan, they will give you one. I have been involved in conversations like that, which are totally, absolutely wrong. So social entrepreneurs, ask your potential investor that question. How long do you intend to hold your capital in my organization? Ask for evidence in their own portfolio. Ask them, what's the average holding period that you have in your portfolio before you demand for an exit? The third criteria, and Alberto, I'll let you go now, is the impact must be measurable. Now, I've seen lots of social entrepreneurs who come to me, of course, a self-confessed real impact investor, and they give me their pitch. And you have a beautiful pitch, and then you have a slide that says the SDGs. This is how I measure my impact. And I throw it back at them. Because I'm sorry, the SDGs is not a way to measure your impact. The SDGs are a great guideline. They're a great framework. But if you are running, say, a vision-orientated company like LOD is, show me what are the health outcomes from the device that you've created, okay? If you're running a clean energy company, show me how many people now have access to power, to electricity, and now are able to, say, earn an income from your intervention. So please, it should be both sides. The social entrepreneur should have their measures, the investor should have their measures. One last thing, if you are a social entrepreneur, question your investors how they measure their impact. And if they tell you it's just jobs, flee, because that is not a measure of impact. That, again, is just a very, very, very basic way of measuring a very general outcome.
Thank you, Kanini. You point out that very important issues. And I know that, Alberto, your Compagnia San Paolo has done a lot in this space, and under your leadership has been able really to reshape very much the positioning in the space of the social finance, but also in deploying capital. And so it would be really good to hear your definition of impact investing of social finance and how Compagnia San Paolo is really positioning there.
Compagnia di San Paolo, I would start saying that is a large foundation in our perception. Of course, with reference to the area, the field where we work, which is basically northwest of Italy, with a very strong focus in the Torino area. So it's a large municipality, 2.5 million people, but still is a limited context. There we are large, in a sense. We are perceived as large. And the second point is that Compagnia San Paolo is a broad scope foundation. So we don't have a single focus, but we fund projects ranging from social issues like social housing, inclusion, communities, education, to arts, culture, restoration, civic participation, and also to research, innovation, healthcare, sports, environment. So, you know, we feel this pressure of a broad range of activities. So, when we started strategically thinking about our plan, and of course, Elena is part of our governance, so she knows very well, being one of the leaders of this process. We considered that we need the needs of our environment, of our territory, were growing in a path that was order of magnitudes larger than the possibility of intervention for us. Even in 2019, then COVID came, the war in Ukraine came, the crisis, the energy crisis, and so on. So this is even more real and true now than when we started thinking about that. So this large spectrum of activities, the pressure of the society and the increasing needs in a very high way would never be paired by the even possibly growth of our granting capacity. And this impact dimension led us thinking that we needed always, when we were analyzing a project, pose this question. So what would be the leverage effect that our money could enable? And also the fact that we basically have two hands, as we usually say. We have a donating hand where we work with our granting budget, but we have also an investing hand when we work with the endowment. And our endowment is significant, is around 8 billion euros, and some of this, and I mean, the point is that I felt that we couldn't be like, not correlated when we invested with respect when we intervene with grants. So we needed to have a similar strategy, of course, with the specific tools and also attentions. But if SDGs are our lighthouse when it comes to what we call institutional activity, so the granting activity, and actually we are organized into 3 goals, which are people, culture, and planet. And we also, when we invest, we needed to take into account ESG, but also SDGs and so on, with the whole endowment. But in particular, we singled out a portion of it. It's 400 million euros that we call, not surprisingly, mission-related investments. And there we started since 2016 investing, really considering the investment as a way to intervene, in a different way or in a complementary way, in an alternative way to grants. But then in 2020, when we did this reorganization according to SDGs, we realized that we needed also to be more, transparent, more in a communicative way, easy to be understood. And when it comes to mission-related, we tried to have two lenses to make more understandable what we were doing. The first lens was the one of TRL, so the technology readiness level. Of course, when we say this now, it's something obvious, but back in 2018 wasn't so obvious. So the idea to organize the tools that we have according to TRL, and also to strategically look for tools where there was a gap in our strategy. For example, we had to organize the things we already had. For example, we were already investors in some VC fund in the social sector, like Ultra Venture, for example. But we were part of social fair, so some area, a social enterprise intervening in very low TRL up to the seed money. But we lacked, for example, an instrument at TRL 0. And so we started working at this idea in Italy, because in Europe was already there, of a recoverable grant and how to set up this recoverable grant. But then we realized we also needed to increase the tool of proof of concept to enhance the array of VC. And so we invested in other funds and so on. And the other lens was what we call the journey from lab to market. Lab, backyard, garage, what you may think that resonates more in your idea. But the idea is from the very beginning to the market. This is another lens that we tried to use to make it more understandable what we are doing. So when you come into contact with the Compagnia in São Paulo, you can leverage on the fact that we are organized according to SDGs, but SDGs, let me say, taken seriously, not a label to add to PowerPoints.
You shape your intervention in a different way according to the person of the company you have in front, looking at like grants or maybe investments. Can you just provide us some clue about it?
So just to clarify, and maybe similar to what Alberto was saying, impact investing uses a variety of investment instruments, okay? So the way Draper Richards Kaplan works is that we originally, our founders were venture capitalists, so they made all their money in Silicon Valley. And when they set up the fund, the main idea was to use the tools and the rigor that they use in venture investing to find, fund, and support social enterprises. And to be honest, my background is, I spent, 10 years in the City of London doing investment banking, private wealth. So, my background is really commercial investing. So I wouldn't call myself somebody who does well in philanthropy or who does well funding NGOs. I wanted to do something that was using those skills that I built in that industry to do good, okay? So this is how Draper Richards works. We will find an entrepreneur and then make a decision, what is the best capital for that entrepreneur? Okay, so it could be grants and it could be convertible debt, it could be a revenue-based instrument, it could be straight equity, but it has to be driven by the model of the social enterprise. I think that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, we don't believe in just giving people money. there's lots of capital out there. You, as a social entrepreneur, you probably have realized it. It's super easy to find money. But the most difficult thing is to find someone who's willing to give you cash and all the support that you need in order to grow and scale. So for example, our entrepreneurs, we have to join the board of every single organization that we invest in, even if we're not majority shareholders. And there's lots of entrepreneurs who say, we don't want DRK on our board, and we say, thank you very much, and we move on. The reason why we do that is we believe, because we invest very early, we believe that in addition to giving capital, we want to help our entrepreneurs scale. We want to help them come up with a scale strategy. We want to help them build up their board. We want to help them hire their first CFO. We want to help them hire their first COO. I interview these roles when we've invested in a company. We go in that deep. So I think that's the main thing there.
And it's a lot of work because you have invested in so many companies.
Yes.
So you are very busy in sitting in all those boards.
Yeah, we only do it for 3 years. We only do it for 3 years, Elena. So after 3 years, the assumption is that we're prepared the entrepreneur to be able to fundraise and leverage in new capital so we can then move on to the next entrepreneur.
And that is really important. And then I think, Alberto, maybe you have also something to say about the kind of support you provide entrepreneurs that is not just a grant or is not just investment, but is much more.
Again, trying to enhance impact and to combine the granting activity with other, features that we as foundation believe to have. Because, as I said, we are a philanthropic institution, but we are also investors. But we are also part of an ecosystem that has people with competences inside. So we think that we can pair or accompany, projects with such kind of apport, not only apporting money. And in our strategic plan, again, we defined this set of tools that we can use to complement the grant with other activities. And almost always when we issue a call or we fund a project, we put aside a part of the money to fund, some project manager, for example, or to provide a set of reference where the beneficiaries, the one that receive the money, can refer to have information. For example, I just mentioned one example. We provided this scheme of next generation we schools calls for the third sector, the public sector, and the schools to prepare our environment to receive the money coming from the recovery plan. And for example, for the local municipalities, we provided a set of 5 consultants that could help, on the legal basis, on the financial basis, on the project management basis, and so on, to improve the projects, not only to get the money, but then to deploy the money in an effective way.
We have 40 people within the venture philanthropy organization, and then we have 11 MDs. So I'm one of them. We have 11 global managing directors. All of us are old and have lots of gray hair, and really have been there, done that. I'm an ex-entrepreneur, so I really understand the challenges that an entrepreneur goes through, raising capital, getting talent through the door. So it's us who are embedded within the company to do the work. Let me finish. And the reason why I'm saying that is, especially if we're dealing with global organizations, so you're dealing with a company in India or Kenya or Africa, you cannot bring an international consultant to help that company because they will not understand the context. So that is why we don't do that as a firm.
So you're saying, Kanini, and maybe is a challenge, and is becoming interesting here. You say, Kanini, that so you don't believe in consultants. You are the one really getting in the job and supporting these companies to grow, or anyway, to face the challenge they have. And how do you, your approach, Alberto, is that you, Compagnia San Paolo is a lean organization. It doesn't have many people compared to the kind of grantees and investment every year is made, because we are talking about under 40, under 50 million euro every year. But what is your reply or your position on what Kanini say about maybe the lack of empathy, maybe?
Local context.
Of a local context. The consultant can bring. Well, the Compagnia San Paolo is working very much in North Italy, and as Alberto say, in Piemonte. But Alberto, can you say something about this point?
Well, I agree on a generally speaking, I agree. I think we need to be very, careful in selecting a consultant, and not to rely, how to say, in a standard way on, for example, the big four, So when it comes to consultant, I mean very specific and tailor-made institutions that can provide such kind of help. But just to give you some examples, in my view, what we use as consultant in that call, for example, were a former vice mayor of a municipality that had to do with public calls, so that knows very well how to issue a public call, a public procurement, So I have this kind of idea of a consultant. We have a very small but very active and very good social enterprises also.
Yeah,
that
because
can provide a consultant in, for example, AI.
The key thing for foundations and investors like us is to actually find a model that works for the sectors that we work in. And maybe it's a combination of both, but I think for us, we've been around for 15 years with about 200 million in terms of the size of the fund. And this is the sort of experience that we've had, and that's what we feel works.
Okay, but now I have a question for you both. If we look at the statistics, at the very end, we have a very little, very tiny allocation of catalytic capital. So why do you think your sector has been not so proactive in really providing what I believe, as an investor, being extremely strategic in really being a trigger for this space?
So maybe let's define catalytic capital, because again, I don't like to use terms unless people are aligned. So catalytic capital is usually the first capital in to attract new investors into either a fund or a social enterprise. So that's how I define it. So I would disagree with you, Elena. I don't think it's a general foundation thing. We actually, that's our ethos. We only invest in companies between the age of 0 to 4 years. And we generally would come onto a cap table as the first institutional investor. So we've had companies come to us who are maybe on a third or fourth round, and we say, no, you've already been able to attract capital, so we have no use and no additionality coming in as an investor. So we say no many times simply because of that, because we call ourselves catalytic capital investors. So moving away from us, I would say others don't like to do it because they have a different risk profile. Usually risk is the reason that would stop funders from being catalytic. And then the second thing is sector. We're agnostic, and I think Alberto's foundation is agnostic. If you are a funder who only does clean energy, or does agriculture and food, or only does water and sanitation, you will have limitations in terms of where you can deploy your capital because you're not sector agnostic. So I do have to say, my view is the more sector agnostic an investor is on the catalytic side, the higher the probability that they'll be able to deploy capital much more.
Well, we'll discuss later on. I'm not really, not sharing this position. I think the market needs more catalytic capital, and I think a foundation can do much more. But Alberto, what do you think?
I can speak for the foundation I know more. So the Italian one, and the one of banking origin, and I highlight origin, banking origin, not banking. And I see basically two problems, or three maybe. The first one is a mindset. So we should be aware of the fact that since, up to 5 years ago, or 4 years ago, foundations like mine would have very separate departments. The financial department still is in a sense, far apart, far away from the role of the foundation as a giving actor. And the financial mindset is the one of keeping the endowment safe, make it, grow for the future generations. And the metric that they use when it comes to an opportunity of investment are rather strict, I would say. So this is the first point. The second point, which is linked to this one, is the fact that we see that the market look at ourselves as a seal of excellence, so to say. If Compagnia invests in a fund, then it has this, snowball effect. So this is, you might say, okay, very good. So why don't you do it more? But we feel also the fact that the reputation issue is very serious, and we need to keep it very serious. So, this fact plays a role. The scrutiny that we have on a team, on investment policy, on everything is very high, and we feel this responsibility. And there is a third and last issue, the fact that we are very much, it's very easier for us to intervene with the grants than with the endowment. For example, we decided an investment of the order of millions in the catalytic fund for the European Commission, to pair the social agenda of the Commission. Whereas when it comes to invest the endowment, we are much more, cautious.
Hi, my name is Boris from Uganda. I'm also an entrepreneur with a startup. But I just wanted you to highlight more on how you expect us to measure our impact since you trashed jobs. Yeah, because we have been singing that we have been able to create X number of jobs, but then if you could kindly highlight more on that.
Sorry, what sector are you in? What does your organization do?
It's a travel online marketplace, so in the tourism sector, digital transformation. Yeah.
Okay, great. So it's not just for yours in general, or yours in particular, your company in particular. Okay, so I'm not here to give a course in impact measurement. I do that though. I teach impact investing. But maybe George, I think the tips I would give you would be that the reason why people use jobs as a metric is because it's a very easy metric to use and to count. It's very, very simple. It's very straightforward. But the thing to keep in mind is that your impact metric should be an outcome. Okay, it should be an outcome and not an output. So when you look at jobs is an output. The next step, I would give you an example, if you're in the tourism sector, is income earned. Maybe you could, if you're focused on marginalized communities, do some research, spend some money on collecting data around average income earned, okay? That's a step further. The other thing you could do is, if you have data, aggregate them by sex. So that's something that Andy was talking about today. Use sex aggregated data. So you show males were able to earn X, females were able to earn Y. So you're going a step deeper than just giving output, you're focusing on outcomes. So if you keep that in your mind, that it's always about taking the next step, you'll reach the promised land. One quick thing, there are now lots of consulting companies that you can ask to help you when it comes to measuring impact. If you don't have an investor like DRK, obviously, because we help our portfolio orgs do all this work, there's 60 decibels, there's acumen, there's and individual consultants. So we don't expect you to be an expert, but make sure that you're spending, whatever it is, a little bit of money, a little bit of time to go deeper in how you measure your impact. It'll be worth your while in the end.
Thank you, Kanini.
Ciao, I'm Flavio from Italy. And Flavio from Italy.
From Italy, okay.
From Rome specifically, if relevant. And knowing the work of Compagnia di San Paolo and comparing it to other international actors, I'm really curious to understand how we can transform, transport, and connect our local impact approaches and objectives and metrics and outcomes to more international trends and obviously organization and trying to scale it internationally.
Well,
and what experience you have on this?
Not an easy question.
Sorry.
Thank
you. Okay, thank you very much. Well, I think there are many answers to this question. One is that we too, even though we are very rooted in Italy and in Torino area, we too have international projects that we fund, in particular when it comes to innovation. We have a rather large project funded in pairs with the Fondazione Milano that is all about open innovation and pairing the innovation community with the needs of the NGOs. So, the NGO expressing a pain, and then with some kind of hackathon or other ways, there are many ways, the innovating community, the community of innovators would provide a solution or a path to a solution to them. So, the first answer is that we do such kind of things also at the international level. Second, as I said, the Catalyst Fund, so the idea of collaborating with other European foundations, it is something that Compagnia di San Paolo does specifically, for example, with the Kim Baldwin Foundation in Belgium, the Volkswagen Stiftung Foundation in Germany, the La Caixa Foundation in Spain, Gulbenkian in Portugal, Wellcome Trust in the UK, for example, to mention some. We do projects together, of course, as I said, on a minority level, but we do. In this kind of project where the European Commission put together the foundation is something to scale up from the local experience to the European one.
And the membership there has been responsible for helping pass actually regulations. So they've also been working with European governments to make impact investing happen in their country.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a much more scalable model for collaboration in addition to what has been mentioned.
And we do have a chapter in Italy, and of course also many foundations here are very, very active. You have just a couple of seconds to reply with, one of the most favorite film is a spaghetti western directed by Sergio Leone, and I don't know whether you have seen it, so you have watched it. It's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So I ask you 1 second, who is the good, the bad, and the ugly in the impact investing scene? And please don't be diplomatic. Maybe you just say the good, but don't be diplomatic.
I think there are many good. I can't just say one. Okay, but I will pick the bad, and I'll have to say why. The bad, BlackRock and Goldman Sachs. They all have impact investing arms, but that is not impact investing. They're all trying to generate above market returns. That is not impact investing. So I would say those are the bad. And then the good, I would say Global Innovation Fund. Yes, I chaired the fund for 5 years, so I'm biased.
Thank you.
And Acumen. Actually, Acumen is doing some
and the
great
ugly,
stuff.
The ugly?
BlackRock and Goldman Sachs.
Alberto.
Well, the bad, I think, is who tries to reshape the fact that the things that they already been doing in this new flavor, let's say. And in particular, the ugly being the metrics, somebody providing metrics that are very convenient, you know. I used to come from the, fair trade world, and it's very weird to me to see now the British Tobacco, Shell, and so on being one of the in the ESG
Absolutely.
portfolio. And so on.
But Elena, he needs to say the bad. You let me off you're letting him off too lightly. Alberto to say.
No, but definitely is almost the 90%. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kanini. Thank you very much, Alberto.